Guten Tag, my name is Jin Park. I'm a lawmaker and a member of the Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee of the 21st National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. And I think it's very timely to hold a seminar today on the topic of perspectives after the inauguration of President Joe Biden. It is also an honor for me to give you a keynote speech on Korea's view on US-China relations. I'm grateful to Mr. Thomas Yoshimura, the head of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation's Korea office, for inviting me to this valuable seminar today. Thank you, German Ambassador, His Excellency Michael Reifenstiel, for your comments on the keynote speech and the experts who will discuss today's topic. Also, the EU Ambassador to Korea, Maria Castillo Fernandez, who is here today with us. Thank you for joining the webinar. Ambassador, it's a pleasure to see you. Global competition and conflicts that began with the trade war between US and China continue. The scope of the conflict between US and China is expanding into the areas of economy, politics, and security and human rights, including fierce competition for technological superiority. South Korea is facing a new geopolitical challenge within the rapidly changing international situation surrounding the peninsula. Under the intensifying competition between US and China over the Korean peninsula and East Asia, South Korea must make a difficult choice between our ally, the United States, and China, our biggest trade partner. It is no longer a realistic option for Moon Jae-in government to keep strategic ambiguity between these two big countries. First of all, I would like to diagnose the relationship between Korea, the United States, and China today. The Korea-US relationship has been a key pillar of Korea's diplomacy and security. The United States has played a significant role in supporting Korea's national security and economic development process. Korea and the United States have a military alliance to deter North Korea's aggression and have pursued mutual national interest through free trade that opens up domestic markets. Recently, however, Korea-US relations have been facing challenges. One of the major reasons is the difference in North Korea policy between Korea and the United States. Moon Jae-in government has been pushing ahead with so-called North Korean peace process over the last 4 years, which is biased towards reconciliation and cooperation with North Korea's Kim Jong-un regime. Through South Korea's diplomatic mediation, President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un met 3 times in Hanoi, Singapore, and Panmunjom. But North Korea's denuclearization has not happened. It has failed. And North Korea's nuclear and missile threats have been augmented. And Moon Jae-in administration's idealistic appeasement policies towards North Korea is a major reason to strain the bilateral relations between Korea and the United States. As you know, last year was a period of turbulent South-North relations. North Korea has blown up a joint liaison office in the Kaesong Industrial Complex and shot and burned a South Korean official on the West Sea. Kim Yo-jong, the first deputy director of the North Korean Workers' Party, threatened by saying if the propaganda leaflets are sprayed from the south to the north, the South Korean authority will pay the price harshly. Nevertheless, our government and the ruling party unilaterally passed a law banning the spread of leaflets to North Korea. This amounts to the suppression of the freedom of expression guaranteed by the Constitution of the Republic of Korea, and also the North Korean people's right to know. what is going on outside of the North. It rather makes North Korea's internal change more difficult and neglects its dire human rights situation. In the recent 2+2 ministerial meeting between Korea and the United States, North Korea's denuclearization was omitted in the joint statement, and the opinions on the North Korean human rights situation were different. Also, Korea and the United States had divergent positions on the ROK-US joint military drills and the transition of wartime operational control. There was also a wide gap in the perception of China between Korea and the United States. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who attended the 2+2, openly rebuked China, using expressions such as abuses of international system, coercion, and aggression. Moon Jae-in administration, however, took a passive attitude to avoid stimulating the Chinese government. As a result, South Korea-US joint statement left out China in its expression. South Korea has a dualistic relationship with China. China is South Korea's largest trading partner, and the two countries have a close economic interdependence through trade. On the other hand, China is a direct party to the Korean War Armistice Agreement and maintains a de facto alliance with North Korea. China retaliated economically in 2016 against South Korea when South Korea allowed to deploy THAAD missiles at a US military base in South Korean soil for the purpose of defending North Korea's nuclear missiles. In response to the Chinese pressure, Moon Jae-in government kept a low profile and promised the so-called three no's policy. The three no's policy means not joining the US-led military defense system, not considering deploying additional THAAD, and not developing security cooperation between Korea, the United States, and Japan into a military alliance. Moon Jae-in government is also trying to secure the Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Seoul in order to push forward peace initiatives towards North Korea. However, China has postponed President Xi Jinping's visit to Korea on the grounds of COVID-19. It seems China is indirectly pressuring Korea not to side with the United States in the US-China conflict. As was pointed out earlier, Moon administration has been taking strategic ambiguity through so-called balancing diplomacy between the US and China. It basically reflects a dichotomous idea, i.e. security with the United States and economy with China. Or in Korean, it's called Anmi Gyeongjung. However, Korea can no longer settle for this artificial dichotomy amid the escalating US-China conflict, because we now live in a world where security and economy cannot be separated. In that sense, Korea's diplomacy and security are now at a critical juncture. Fundamentally, conflict between the US and China is a structural problem rather than a situational one. This is not a short-term trade and diplomatic conflicts, but a long-term process that has been amplified since the 2008 global financial security. The trade war that erupted under President Trump has yet to be resolved, and trade disputes between the US and China continue under the newly launched Biden administration. The competition for technological superiority between the US and China is seemingly intensifying under the new Biden government. Besides these conflicts, the US and China are also discussing ways for cooperation with each other to overcome such issues as coronavirus pandemic, climate change, and nuclear proliferations. However, there is no question that the US-China conflict is intensifying in the economic, security, and human rights areas. President Biden and President Xi Jinping argued with each other in their first phone call conversation on February 10th. President Biden expressed concern about China's coercive and unfair economic behavior, whereas President Xi Jinping drew a line asking not to intervene, saying that Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Xinjiang are internal affairs of China. Last week, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi held a high-level meeting in Alaska, where the delegations from the two countries openly had a head-on collision over economic, security, and human rights situation and human rights issues. Although US and China will avoid direct confrontation for mutual national interest, the US-China conflict will continue in various forms in the future, in my view. China has expressed its strong will to achieve the world's highest level in high-tech fields, such as artificial intelligence, information and telecommunication, 5G and 6G, robots, and drones by 2030. The US expects the US-China conflict to develop into a fierce contestation between China's technical authoritarianism and America's technological democracy. If the traditional competition between the US and China was focused on hard power, such as missiles, warships, and fighter planes, the upcoming competition will be transformed into future technologies, such as semiconductors, artificial intelligence, information and telecommunications, and quantum computing, etc. The United States will strengthen its alliance network to secure strategic materials such as semiconductors, electric batteries, and rare earth materials against China's competition. The Quad, a security consultative body which co-aligns the United States, Japan, Australia, and India in the Indo-Pacific region, is a prime example. The countries with top semiconductor production capacity, that is Taiwan and China, South Korea, need to make clear strategic choices amid the growing conflict between the US and China. The US is reinforcing its alliance with Japan to counterbalance China and will strengthen its coalition with countries producing semiconductors in the future. Taiwan is a good example. The US is also strengthening its solidarity with Australia against China's sanctions on exports of rare earth elements while conducting joint naval exercises with India in the Indian Ocean. So the cooperation among these countries, democratic countries in the region, is very actively being promoted currently. Then what strategic choice should Korea make in the face of the US-China conflict? First, the normalization of the Korea-US alliance. So far, Korea-US relations have been at odds in policies on North Korea and China and security negotiations. However, after the launch of Biden administration, the alliance diplomacy has been reinstated, and Korea and the US have reached a defense cost-sharing agreement. Also, it is an encouragement in normalizing the Korea-US alliance that 2+2 Foreign and Defense Ministerial meeting was held for the first time in 5 years. In order for Korea to properly cope with the turbulent situation around the Korean Peninsula, it should strive to normalize and further strengthen the Korea-US alliance, which shares the common core values of democracy, free markets, rule of law, and human rights. strengthening Korea-US cooperation in such areas as core technology, clean energy, and biohealth care is also very important. Furthermore, Korea's participation in the Quad Plus, if it happens, will reinforce multilateral cooperation among democratic countries in the Indo-Pacific region. Second, pragmatic cooperation and strategic communication with China. Last year, Korea-China bilateral trade reached $243.4 billion, accounting for 23.3% of Korea's total trade volume. China is Korea's largest economic partner, and the smooth development of Korea-China relations is important to Korea's national interest. Korea also needs to facilitate strategic communication with China to reduce friction with the latter and pursue practical partnership. Regarding previously mentioned THAAD missile tech controversy, China's retaliatory overreaction could have been eased if Korea had actively communicated with China in advance. Korea should also reduce its excessive trade dependence on China and diversify its market to Europe, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and South America to minimize the China risk. Third, a trilateral cooperation among Korea, the US, and Japan. The current relationship between Korea and Japan is worst ever. Conflicts between Korea and Japan, such as historical issues, export control, and security discord, have become complicated. The prolonged conflict between Korea and Japan, however, is a negative factor for the national interest of both countries. Korea shares democracy and market economy with Japan and forms a common alliance with the United States. Korea and Japan also have common security interest when dealing with North Korea's nuclear and missile security threats. Biden administration stresses the importance of cooperation among Korea, the US, and Japan in the Asia-Pacific region. Considering all these, it is necessary to establish a triangular cooperative system among Korea, the US, and Japan for peace, stability, and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia by making a breakthrough in the Korea-Japan impasse at the earliest. Finally, let me mention about Germany. Germany is a great nation that leads peace and prosperity at the center of Europe. Germany has maintained a security alliance with the United States through NATO, the collective security guarantee system, and reunifying the divided East and West Germanys and achieving peace and prosperity over the past 3 decades. So Germany always inspires Korea in many ways. And I think that Korea-Germany cooperation and partnership and sharing our wisdom will absolutely contribute to the better interest of both countries for the future. In this regard, I would like to thank the Konrad Adenauer Foundation for hosting such a valuable seminar today with a serious interest in Asian and Korean issues. I hope that good opinions will be shared among the participants for the peace and prosperity of the global society surrounding the Korean Peninsula in the following discussion. Thank you for your attention.